Joining me now is John Ziegler. He is a journalist and a talk show host as well. He's at freespeechbroadcasting.com. He's also at Mediaite. He is a conservative. I've talked to John before. We had an interesting discussion about Sarah Palin a long time ago in a different studio. But John, welcome back on the Young Turks.
You have a great memory.
I do. No, I actually really enjoyed that conversation. I thought we had a real exchange of ideas, even though we didn't agree, obviously.
I agree with that, actually.
Yeah, so John, you're in an interesting situation here because you're a rare conservative who not only started out as not believing in Trump, but has remained that way. Most of the never Trumpers or whatever category you want to put them in have folded and in fact have become obsequious to Trump. Glenn Beck's a prominent example, but there's a lot of them. Lindsey Graham, perfect example, is now kissing Donald Trump's ass all over TV. So I want to talk about impeachment, but first, because you've written about it, but first, before we even do that, there's no question, I talked to you. I mean, you are a diehard conservative. So why not Trump?
Well, because unlike the people that you mentioned and others, I actually believe in my principles, and I am not what I refer to as a cash-servative or a click-servative. I write what I believe, and I believe what I believe because it's based in principle, it's based in logic, it's based in truth, at least my view of the truth. It's not changing. I do not believe that Donald Trump is a conservative. I don't believe that in a rational world he would represent the conservative movement. What has happened in the last 2.5, 3 years with this coup within the Republican Party is the most depressing thing I've ever seen in politics. It is outrageous. It's absurd. I'm not making any money from this. Like most of the people who are still left on my side, I have been hurt economically by this position, but I don't care because I sleep well at night, and I believe that history will judge me far more kindly than they will judge my counterparts who have caved in to, as you say, kiss Donald Trump's ass as he is some sort of God king, when in fact he's a con man. He is a man who does not believe in the truth, and he is a dangerous, dangerous person to be president of the United States.
So look, it's actually not complicated that he's a con man. He's been a con man his whole life. Everybody knows it. The only reason why everybody doesn't call him that is because the right wing has collectively decided that they're going to back the con man, and the mainstream media is cowed into being neutral. The guy has a whole history of criminality and running one con after another. But let's put that aside. What are the things that you think make him not conservative? What are the conservative principles that he is against?
Well, you've already started the show with one of them. I mean, he's in favor of tariffs. He doesn't understand tariffs. I mean, he's not in favor of restricting spending. Even the tax cuts were not paid for. They were effectively taking a loan out from China. These are not conservative concepts. I think that his only conservative positions are based in what he believes his cult wants him to do. I think he would change in a moment if he thought that the cult was going to cheer him more loudly for that change in position. I don't believe he believes in anything. There are other things that I don't believe that are conservative, and I actually do agree with him in concept and in some things. I live in Southern California. I'd like to see the illegal immigration problem under control, but nothing he's doing is going to do that. By the way, where's our wall paid for by Mexico? That was always a con. That was never going to happen. And so, and to me, the biggest thing is he does not accept truth as a bedrock principle. And to me, I'm a truth guy. I live my entire life based upon the truth having value. And he has destroyed single-handedly, has diminished the accountability for lying to almost zero. And to me, other than that, nothing else matters, as I often say. Other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play? When you diminish the value of truth and to nothing, and the damage of lying to nothing, I almost don't care about judges. I'm in favor of Kavanaugh and conservative judges and all that. But to me, there are some things that are more important than that, and the truth is one of them, and Trump has single-handedly destroyed the truth.
So John, one last thing before we move on to impeachment. But as you just correctly pointed out there, he's playing to the crowd. If the crowd responded in a different way, he'd run a different con. So are you more discouraged that 90% of Republican voters like what Donald Trump is saying and don't mind that he's lying?
I have to tell you, and I've done this before, but I've not done this in your presence. I believe that people like you have been at least, and I underline at least, somewhat vindicated in your long-term view that I had long disagreed with what the nature of the conservative base was. You know, as a talk show host, you do these events and you meet people and you think, well, these are just the crazies. These aren't the representative of the larger conservative base. That was wrong. And the most depressing part of this whole thing is I have to acknowledge that there's at least a tinge, if not more than a tinge, of racism that was keeping the conservative base together throughout all these years. I did not believe that. I did not see it. I thought it was an unfair attack on conservatives. And I now realize that that is absolutely true. Now, to what degree, we can have a discussion of that, but there's no question that racism was part of what kept conservatism together. It was not about fiscal conservatism. It was not about conservative principles. It was not about the Constitution. Look what happened with the Tea Party movement. No one cares about the Constitution anymore. These are all the same people. They were the Tea Party people less than 10 years ago, and now they're believing in all sorts of different things because they got a different con man running the show. So I feel incredibly disheartened that I misread to a large degree what was making up the conservative base. In retrospect, I have to say I was a little bit, always a little confused as to how Republicans were doing so well in elections, because I knew that a majority of people did not believe in quote unquote conservative principles, but I always just presumed it was because Democrats couldn't get their act together. Now I have a different view of that.
Well, look, it actually does take a lot of courage to admit that. And look, if this is the first time you're seeing John, you should go back and watch our old debate about Sarah Palin. Okay, John is diehard conservative. It's not like he's a progressive coming along and bashing Trump. And look, if you care about the truth, those are the conclusions you'd come to. But a lot of people make money based on selling these stories. Look, Beck was against Trump, and then he started losing money like crazy. He started losing his audience. He started losing that base. And then he turned around and put on a Make America Great Again hat. And so that's how that game is played.
Well, I will say that I was understanding of the nature of the conservative movement media far sooner than most people were, because I understood that this was a business, not a cause. This is conservatism in a media sense is a cause is a business pretending to be a cause. That's the con. They pretend that they're in favor of whatever conservatism is at the moment, but it's really just a business. And you mentioned Glenn Beck, who I consider to be a friend, and I have been very disappointed by some of the things that he has done recently. I've defended him in quite a few ways because he's in a unique situation with a lot of people working for him, employees relying on him, and people losing their jobs because he was losing audience. And so I think that needs to be taken into consideration. But by and large, this is all a con. This is partially why so many of them embrace Trump. He's one of them. He understands the con better than they do. And that's what conservative media is. That's why I got out of talk radio about a dozen years ago, by and large, and got into other things, because it was frankly like being in the mob. That's what this is. And it's not a coincidence that the leader of that group now is effectively a mob boss himself, and Donald Trump.
So, John, finally, let's turn to impeachment, because you don't impeach someone for lying. You don't impeach someone for not being conservative enough or even being a con man. So what do you think Trump should be impeached over?
Well, I come at this from a truly unique position, because I don't know if you're aware, but I have a very good friend who's the chairman of the Budget Committee, Democrat John Yarmuth, and John Yarmuth has publicly acknowledged that I changed his position on impeachment to be in favor of impeachment. And now he's one of the leaders of the what might be called the impeachment caucus. So I have been in favor of Trump's impeachment for a long time for a number of reasons. But if specifically, I actually have some reasons that are different than what most people are giving. I personally believe right off the bat, he's in violation of the emoluments clause of the Constitution on a daily basis. This does not get nearly enough publicity. And if he was a Democrat, Republicans and conservatives would be screaming about this constantly. That's, if you were looking for what you're going to put in the articles of impeachment, that should be right at the top. I believe that the firing of James Comey was impeachable, not because he doesn't have the right to fire his his FBI director, but because the firing of Comey makes his statements to James Comey, specifically, I need you to go easy on Mike Flynn, I need your loyalty, that makes those statements clearly obstruction of justice. I would add, similarly to that, something that Robert Mueller could not possibly have known about, which is that I believe the firing of Jeff Sessions the day after the midterm election. Now that we know what he did with that by hiring Bill Barr and Bill Barr's active muting, and I might even argue obstruction of justice himself, of the Mueller report, that the firing of Jeff Sessions, who had recused himself from the Russian investigation, was a clear act of obstruction of justice. Those are just three things that are right off the bat that we know about. Then there's all sorts of things within the report that I do believe go to the direction of obstruction of justice. And frankly, I'm not even sure how it is that Robert Mueller, who I think went easy on Donald Trump, possibly because he was afraid of this whole witch hunt charge against him and wanted to make sure that everyone viewed him as highly credible and above it all, and played right into Trump's hands. I don't understand, having read the report, how Robert Mueller even quote unquote exonerates Trump on conspiracy, because we don't know whether there was a conspiracy, because there was so much obstruction that it was impossible to find this out, and Trump didn't even do an interview. I think, frankly, there are answers in his interview that are impeachable. There are obvious lies when he says he doesn't remember things that of course he remembers, a man who claims to have the best memory of anybody in the world. So to me, having been much in favor of Bill Clinton's impeachment and removal from office, the impeachment articles against Donald Trump are voluminous, and they are far more powerful than anything Republicans ever dreamed of having against Bill Clinton. But whether or not that'll actually happen, I have my doubts, because I think we're living in a world of cowardice. And I think we're living in a world where people don't read. And I think we're living in a world where having a cult by your side is your greatest political asset. And Donald Trump has that. And the conservative media and the Republican Party are scared out of their minds and will defend him to the death.
John, one last quick thing here. So you have all this overwhelming evidence, and it's, I mean, even if you didn't go to all the things that you mentioned, just on obstruction, 11 clear cases in the Mueller report, and campaign finance violations, his co-conspirators in prison right now. But yet the Democrats do nothing. What do you think is going on there? Why do you think Nancy Pelosi is refusing to impeach what is basically her the opponent, the other party's president, who has done all these criminal actions? Why has she turned from the resistance to the assistance?
I wish I had an answer to that. I have spoken to Congressman Yarmouth about this numerous times privately, and I think he believes that she understands the best interest of the party, and he has faith in her, in what she's doing. I think it's a misreading of the Clinton impeachment, personally. I think there is a great myth that was created that Bill Clinton was helped and the Democratic Party was somehow helped by Bill Clinton's impeachment. Please look at history. The next presidential election, less than a year later, about a year later, after Bill Clinton's impeachment, was won by the son of the man who Bill Clinton defeated against his own vice president. So you cannot argue that somehow the Democratic Party was helped or the Republican Party was harmed by impeaching Bill Clinton. Look at the next several congressional elections, including the one right after Bill Clinton's impeachment. Yeah, Republicans didn't win by as large a margin as expected, but they still won, which back in the 90s was a new phenomenon in the House of Representatives. So I believe that there's a grotesque misreading of history that is causing people to be too afraid of doing the right thing. And I don't know whether that's going to carry the day or not, but I fear that it may.
All right, John Ziegler, read him at Mediaite.com and of course, freespeechbroadcasting.com as well. John, thank you for joining us, appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
The TYT Plus app is now available on iOS and Android. Download to get more TYT content at tyt.com/app.